Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission Work Session for Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. We have just a handful of items this evening, and we're going to begin with an annual opportunity that we have to meet with our local delegation to the Georgia General Assembly. So we're very fortunate tonight to be joined by Representative Marcus Wiedauer, Representative Spencer Fry, and Representative Houston Gaines. For longtime commission watchers, we've often held this meeting in November, December, and we've worked to back it up a number of months, knowing kind of how fertile this pre-filing period is for the General Assembly and how much work happens before the actual Assembly engagement of 40 days begins in January of the following year. And so we hope this is an opportunity to have a few months of conversation between September and January. So if we need to continue to work on some items or continue to have conversations, we've got that time and space to do that. I want to begin this evening just by asking our representatives to introduce themselves and highlight any of the things that they're looking forward to or they anticipate happening in the 2020 legislative session, be those code or legislative priorities or funding items or anything else that you see on the radar. So Houston, if you want to kick it off.
I'm Houston Gaines. I think I've had the opportunity to work with all of you and get to know most of you. And excited to be here. I know this is our first. Last year, Marcus and myself, we watched. So it's good to actually join you and certainly look forward to our discussion. In terms of next year's session, I think that the budget is going to be probably one of the most significant items that's of conversation. You know, the governor's asked for some spending cuts, which I think will help streamline our state government in a lot of ways, and so. That will certainly be a big topic of conversation. I think taxes in general will be a big topic of conversation. Look forward to hopefully reducing our state income tax next year below where we did a couple of years ago. I think that'll be certainly a major topic in the 2020 session. Then healthcare, I think in general, right now is one of the major conversation pieces in the state and in the country. And this year we passed over 20 healthcare-related items, and I was excited to be a part of several of those bills that I think will help save lives and save money. And Spencer and I both serve on the health committee, and I think we're going to see a lot more items related to health care next year. Lieutenant Governor, the governor, the speaker, and others have certainly made improving access and lowering costs for all Georgians a priority. And so I think in general, though, the budget, taxes, and health care are probably the three major items for next year's session. And generally speaking, there's always one that you don't know that's coming, and so I can't answer that one. But thank you all for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Representative Fry.
Thank you. I'm Spencer Fry, represent House District 118, it's North and East Athens. I appreciate y'all spending the time with us and getting out here early so we can work on the request sheet right here. I think it's a great list of items, and I look forward to talking to you about it. Next year, I think like Houston said, we don't really know exactly what's going on. We can hear that the governor has asked for a 4% across-the-board agency cut for most of our social service networks. It seems that it's going to be a pretty tough battle, I believe, in next session. We know all fiscal legislation originates in the House, and there seems to be a little bit of a dust-up that occurred when the governor wanted his department heads not to report to a pending legislative committee to look and see what we could do with the budget ahead of time. And so I'm very interested to see how that's going to work out. It's our responsibility as members of the House to generate the state budget and to recommend it and approve the document that is finally approved. So very interesting times here in the state of Georgia, and I look forward to speaking with you about what we can do to make Athens a better place to live for everyone.
Thanks, Representative Fry. Representative Wiedauer, any thoughts?
Well, good evening. I'm Marcus Wiedauer. I've met almost every one of you. Just thankful to be here. I think they kind of touched on them. Obviously, with everything we've been hearing lately, I mean, the budget's going to be a huge topic, and how that's addressed. I think from my belief is that we're going to find ways to streamline things and not cut essential programs, which kind of leads into one of the things that I'm passionate about, which I'm looking forward to getting back down there I was fortunate to be part of some foster care legislation last year that I'm looking forward to advancing some other pieces there. And with that kind of mentality, I think we need to make sure that the essential programs that are in place aren't defunded, but we find ways to streamline inner workings within the departments to create the efficiencies needed to cut the budget. So really looking forward to be part of that, and just happy to be here and happy to welcome in your comments tonight.
Thank you, Representative Wiedauer. You guys have a list in front of you. It's 20 items, given that you can read, and you will be doing quite a bit of that in the coming legislative session, as you always do. I'm not going to go down the entire list, but I think it is valuable, probably for you and for members of the public, for me to highlight some things that are pertinent to specific legislation that's coming forward, or some specific legislative language that we hope to see passed into law in the 2020 session, or some line items budgetarily. So kind of one of the things that has come up in conversation significantly over a number of years is item number 2 on your list, nonpartisan unified government elections, which we would like to see move to the general election date by local preference. Sometimes, hey, Senator Cowsert, good to have you here. Good to see you. Y'all were joined by Senator Bill Cowsert from the Georgia State Senate. And Bill, I'm actually going to defer to you. Just asked everybody to introduce themselves and talk about any of your hopes and dreams and aspirations for the 2020 legislative session, or anything you see high on the radar.
Bill Cowsert, Senate District 46. That includes most of Clarke County, all of Oconee, and a good bit of Walton County. We're really not to the stage yet to have a legislative agenda. Everybody is looking at different ideas and initiatives. We have study committees meeting all fall, so it'll be a while before we formulate an agenda, so I don't have anything specific.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Sure. Just running through kind of a handful of those things that are related to some specific legislation that may be still live from the last legislative session, or related to a specific line item budgetarily. We've asked in the past for our elections to be moved back to November. We're sensitive to the notion that those other unified governments around the state may not be in exactly the same position we are. And so we would like that just to be a local preference that could be serving Columbus differently than serves Athens, Macon maybe different than Augusta. But certainly, I think for the people of Athens-Clarke County, we would like to have them have the opportunity to serve their local elected select their local elected body in November, when we know that there's going to be most significant turnout. Just going a little bit down, item number 6, as you know from its very engaging conversation last legislative session, HB 511 around transit is still alive. I know many folks in the state have framed this the rural transit bill, but I think it could do potentially a lot more for communities rural and urban and mid-sized like Athens zone. We would like in that legislation to be able to implement a transit support fee via motor vehicle registration if that was voter approved. So if they would like to be able to add a line item as a locality, that would be something that could support operational necessities within transit. Item 7 regards Senate Resolution 291 regarding wage increases for those University System of Georgia employees who are at the lower rung of the tier. Obviously, when you're in a community where a USG institution is among the largest or one of the largest employers, that just has a very significant impact on the local economy and the life and health of the local citizenry. Kind of going down a little bit, item number 11 asks that state taxes collected on the sale of aviation fuel be dedicated to the improvement of public use airports. We understand very generally that dedication of those funds has wavered over the years, with sometimes those being dedicated to the general fund and others being more specifically allocated. If you look at the back side, we would like the opportunity to have some local legislation around a homestead exemption for homeowners with a household income at or below 150% of the federal poverty level for a family of 3. This, we believe, would allow us to much better support our homeowners who also happen to be of a low income threshold. You know, one of the things that I'm sure y'all have recognized just in being in this market and around the real estate market is that the cost of housing is rising, and we don't want that reality to push anyone out of their home or make it challenging to be a homeowner. And then the last thing I'll highlight is, as you know, there was legislation in 2019 that would have preempted local government's ability to regulate building design elements in single or double family dwellings, and we just hope that stays dead. I guess I will state it that way. And certainly I think there are a lot of other things that we are wanting to do to make sure that our local code is manageable and usable. We're in the midst of some conversations about housing affordability across the affordability spectrum and doing some kind of very active look at our own code. So we don't want you to think that concerns that may exist in the building community are falling on deaf ears. We're very much paying attention to those things, but we think the breadth of the legislation that was in front of you last session was too great for really effectiveness of local communities. I know you heard that from a variety of communities across the state. So I would highlight just that handful of items. I don't know if commissioners have some other questions just pertinent to the budget. I know, we've talked about the prospect of system-wide, agency-wide reduction in expenditures next year, and I know we're very concerned about the way that could impact some of our agencies like D.FACS, who we have in the room tonight and we'll be hearing from, and those other agencies that really need every dollar they can to support our neediest members of the community. Commissioner Wright.
I'll go first. First of all, I want to thank you guys formally. I've thanked some of you individually for the brunch bill and that coming to reality. I think we may have talked about that one 3, maybe 4 different times meeting together. And so I hope that's worked. I think it's worked well in our community, and I hope the other ones that have chosen to do that, it's worked well for. So I appreciate that. The number 1 on this list, the environmental health, the septic tank inspections and regulations, it's my understanding that's all state level through the Board of Health. Isn't that right, Melissa? And we have a lot of very old septic tanks, and we would hope that we could get more activity, more frequent inspections, so that we're not losing affordable housing because the septic tanks have failed on properties that aren't large enough to put in what is the new septic tank strategies. So we would hope that there could be some ways for us to have more frequent inspections, reliable inspections, and funding we would hope would not get cut in that area, so that can at least improve and then help us with that kind of complexity that's in our area. I think we got a report recently, and I don't even think a third of the numbers of the septic tanks in that specific report that's tonight, I think, didn't have any inspection in a while, maybe 5 years. So I'm not sure what the cycle is, but if we could increase that cycle of inspections so that we can be keeping people in those homes.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one thing on the issues that you went over. Number 2, I just wanted to mention this. We actually introduced a bill, and Spencer and Marcus both signed it as well, that would have actually done what you asked there on number 2. I think it was House Bill 520. I looked it up before I came over, but that was one of our bills that we worked on this year, and it is challenging because it's a bill that would have to impact the entire state. We're trying to look at different ways to maybe allow local governments to consolidate governments to look at that. But that is something that I hope that we can work together on with moving our local elections back to November.
Great. Thanks, Representative Gaines. I appreciate it. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I want to reiterate the septic tank request. This is actually a public health issue. We have a great deal of rental property in our community, and there are quite a few areas where the septic tanks are failing. The property owners have no interest in investing more in them, and you have a population that is put in danger by these leaking tanks, and they're also leaking into our streams, our watershed, which, our drinking water comes out of there. So if we could have some ability to locally mandate pumping or regularly inspect. I've sat on the Board of Health now for 5 years, and this has been an issue that we've talked about for quite some time, and we've actually gotten some local little bit more local regulation, but whatever you can do to allow us to investigate more and mandate pumping, because that can greatly, greatly extend the life of a septic tank and allow us to do some long-term planning. If we do need to extend sewer lines, like we'll be talking about tonight, that can give us the timeline for it to extend the lives of these things. I also want to talk about the wage increases for university system employees.
Commissioner Lake, I think Representative Fry might have had a
sorry.
comment about the
Yeah,
septic
just
question.
we stay on topic for that, thank you for bringing that up. Is this, do we have any statistical data that would show the issues that we're having with the streams relative to where we know that the septic tanks are located? I mean, can we get some
we
of
do
that
have
data
that.
and really make a point?
We've done an enormous amount of that stream testing, some as the unified government through our Public Works Office, and some in conjunction with UON and other kind of nonprofit providers. So I think we'd be happy to help you with some data, that could demonstrate that, those impaired streams, could well be impacted by the cluster of untended septic systems out there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. If we can show that there is some sort of potential cause going on with that we'd have a much better chance.
We had a
of-
very detailed work session, 2 or 3 years ago, that we can gather that, I'm
Great, I'd
sure.
love to see that if we could.
Yeah.
As a follow-up to that, have you guys gotten out far enough down the road on a suggested frequency?
The suggested.
I know some of that's gonna go back to
it's
usage,
the
but-
suggested frequency, and it depends on the usage and how many
Sure.
people are in a household, but from what I understand from Board of Health conversations, is 3 to 5 years. Every 3 to 5 years, you should have your septic tank pumped. And that can greatly extend the life. A typical tank only has 25 years of life in it, and that can extend it, almost double it if you do it regularly.
So some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight, it talks about tank hauler manifest from 2017 to present. 96 tanks were pumped out, 32 pumped more than once. We've got 1,418 septic tanks in this one area that we're going to be talking about tonight. So what you're wanting is numbers, that you
Yeah,
can
just to
see
see,
just how long has it been and how many, and
Well, really, if there's a stream that we
Yeah.
know is bad based on the data that UON is
Yeah.
bringing us, and I've done the stream testing with those guys, they do great work. And so if we know there's a stream bad there, and then we know where the septic tanks are located, that we could show that potentially that's causing the problem, that would give us a reason to try to regulate that a little more, if it's directly connected. I think that would be helpful.
well, since you're going to be thinking about this through the night, and you're not probably going to stay for this
do,
part of our
I do,
work
I really
session,
do, I
if you go
promise.
home, it's on the website, so you can pull down
Okay.
the topic of the Sandy Creek Basin. And you can get some of the data that we have just on that area.
Tonight's agenda?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
And
that,
we'll gather some more comprehensive information for all of you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did, actually. I wanted to talk about the wage increases for lower-paid UGA employees. That's our largest employer. I'm one of those employees, so I have a little selfish reason for supporting this. But, we do have a tremendous income disparity in this community. And, as a county government, we've committed to a living wage, and we would hope that our major employers would as well, and many of them do. I know our hospitals do. So we're hoping that y'all can bring this forward to the Board of Regents so we can, bring those lower-paid UGA employees up to a living wage. And there's quite a lot of statistics based on, I know Commissioner Denson has some handy, that talk about the number of UGA employees that are essentially living below what is considered a living wage. And part of, related to that is asking to reestablish the income cap on the Hope Scholarship. Back 20-some years ago, when I was a lowly journalist, I interviewed Governor Zell Miller a few years into the Hope Scholarship when the impacts were just starting to be seen in Athens. And he was pretty perturbed that soon after the establishment of the scholarship and the income caps were removed. The scholarship was initially intended to have some need-based element to it. It wasn't intended to be basically an entitlement for the wealthy. I spent a few years also as the editor of Education Journal, and so I learned about the direct correlation between income status and student achievement. And so the people that are most likely to qualify for that hope are from the higher income communities, and I would hope that we could reestablish that income cap, because quite frankly, I'll read off some statistics. 60% of UGA students come from families in the top 20% income bracket. The median income, family income for UGA students is about $130,000 a year. You know, a regular UGA tuition is pocket change for some of these folks. So, you know, if we were able to redirect some of that funding into programs that could be aimed at some of these lower income communities and help these lower income students achieve that 3.0 GPA. Right now, there's a whole bunch of very wealthy students going to school for free on the dimes of folks whose only hope is a lottery ticket. So I would hope we can honor the former governor's original intentions for the scholarship and reestablish that cap and redirect it towards some very real needs.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I'll just back up Commissioner Link a little bit on this. That right now there's some legislation in the Senate. I got it on there. What is it here? SR 291, which is in the Appropriations Committee. It's on the docket. I know Senator Ginn, who couldn't be here tonight, is on that committee. So one of the steps that we just like to see would be a hearing held on SR 291. I know Representative Fry, you signed on to a resolution in the House that was read and accepted. But I think that the best place to start would just be having a discussion here. And I think that you know, many of the institutions under USG here in Georgia would agree to be able to pay their lower income workers a little bit more. And one of the things that we're asking for is that the raises be put in place be a flat amount rather than a percentage base, because again, when you have the low income workers, they're receiving the least amount when they get those raises. You have somebody who's making high up $200,000, you get a 2% raise, you're getting a pretty good raise. But when you're bringing home $29,000, it's not nearly enough. So we'd love to see that. I know that's what happened with the teachers in this last budget. So we'd like to see this a similar kind of philosophy taken to the raises being given to University System of Georgia employees. And I think that would be a great step to getting those low-income workers paid a living wage.
I think that's a great idea. I appreciate y'all bringing that up. You know, in my day-to-day job, we see the statistical analysis of what happens when you put more money in the pockets of people who don't have a lot to start with, and they're able to pay for educational opportunities. They're able to fix their transmission. They're certainly not taking that money and going on vacation to Aruba. If they're staying, every dime they spent is staying local, and we're collecting taxes back, state and local taxes on those funds. So definitely having those opportunities for those folks is very important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Commissioner Thornton?
My question is for anybody but State Representative Fry. I'd like to know about Medicaid expansion. It's been on the table for years and years and years, and we've kind of pushed back on it. What was the rationale, because it is on our list again, for not having? And I ask because I have seen several premature deaths, especially in low income. I can name 5 in Bethel Homes alone, and I do know that these folk did not have health care, not adequate health care. One lady was actually, they rather treat her, put her on hospice than to give her help with her heart condition, and she died. So I would just like to know from my personal, why is Medicare, Medicaid expansion just kind of not reaching folk? Or why is it not? What's the rationale? Somebody? Anybody?
I mean, one thing I will mention is this year we passed a waiver, which was, I think, Senate Bill 106, that, you know, we still are in that process of Deloitte, I believe, is the consultant on that we're working with them to come up with our application to the federal government. And I think that a waiver is a program that potentially makes a lot of sense for our state, that'll help us lower costs and increase access. You know, the reality is, obviously, Medicaid just there are some challenges with the system, whether it's reimbursement rates for physicians, where certain physicians won't even take Medicaid patients, and so there's challenges. But I'm excited about the waiver. I think that there's a lot of potential there. There's still, what we passed this year authorized an 1115 and a 1332 waiver, which is two different programs. The 1115 is the goal of trying to increase access for more Georgians. The 1332 it would allow the state to reinsure basically insurance opportunities so that we can lower costs for everybody. That wouldn't just impact those who are now gaining coverage. It would help lower premiums for everybody, because I think what we've seen obviously is an increase in premiums across the board, particularly over the last 8 years. And so I think that that's something where the waiver, both elements, the 1115 and the 1332, will help increase access and lower costs.
Thank you.
Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And on that, just to also expand on what Commissioner Thornton was bringing up, while we do have that waiver in place, we also know it's very similar to what they passed in Utah, and the feds have rejected their waiver request. And with it being so similar, it seems almost everyone is expecting the federal government to reject our waiver also. So at that point, we're kind of, we still have to do something, I think is all y'all understand and also agree with. And I think the easiest thing to do here, what is still on the table, definitely if this waiver is rejected, the 1115, is to do Medicaid expansion. And I think it's well past time. And just so everybody watching at home and listening too understands, when we talk about the Medicaid gap and these people who are left out that we need to fill, who those people are, and we're talking parents of children who are below the federal poverty line, married adults without children who make less than $15,930. And when I say that, if you work full-time, a minimum wage job, you make $15,080. That is below that line. You work full-time, a minimum wage job, you are in the Medicaid gap, you cannot get the insurance. But also, I think you guys will realize, you can't afford to have insurance for your family if you're making $15,000. And we're also talking unmarried adults earning between $0 and basically about $12,000. And this is desperately needed. I mean, Georgia has one of the highest uninsured rates in the entire country. I mean, we're doing our country, or doing our community here in Athens a disservice, and honestly, letting people die. I mean, when it comes down to it, and I understand the politics of this can be difficult, but whenever we're leaving, the federal government's going to pay 90% of this. We only have to pay 10%. I understand that 10% is still a lot. It is. But of course, that's also going to be money that's going to be circulated into our economy through our hospitals. And almost every major hospital and healthcare provider here in Georgia, while they do have concerns about how Medicaid paid back, they also do ask for Medicaid expansion. They've been advocating for it. So I think if we're going to use that logic, that argument there, to listen to them, they're asking for it. So I just honestly, I beg of y'all to do something here. I really do. I know all of you. I know Representative Fry. I know Senator Kauser. We've had this conversation a lot of times over many years, and unfortunately, over those years, people have died unnecessarily. In Florida, they have a very similar situation. My mother found herself in the Medicaid gap as she was diagnosed with cancer last year, and her cancer was found late, because she was sent home after she was at the hospital, but she didn't have insurance, so she was sent home. And many of the doctors that she saw, specialists saw afterwards, realized that if that had been found months earlier, she'd be in a better situation. So this is a real thing that affects real people. And y'all have voices and y'all have power to do something about this. And it's the right thing to do. So, thank you.
Other items? Commissioner Edwards.
I too would like to say a little prayer that one day soon we can work together and expand Medicaid in this state. The U.S. Census just released figures that found Georgia does have one of the highest uninsured rates in the nation, about 13.7%, 1.4 million people without health insurance. And if you look at the rankings, you've got down at the bottom, Alabama, Mississippi, then Georgia, third from the bottom, Texas and Oklahoma below us. So 47th in the nation, behind Alabama, Mississippi. The South in general has seen a dramatic increase of uninsured children, the only region to see such a trend. So I'm saying a prayer along with my colleagues here and others in this room that this state legislature can effectively act on this crisis. And if it's not Medicaid expansion, I don't care what name goes on to it. But we've got to come up with some solution here. I pray that we can to address this growing problem of uninsured children in this state. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming here today. And it feels good to get behind the rail as a group and talk with each other face to face. So thanks.
Well, and one thing I will say is I think we all agree that they want to increase access and increase coverage and lower costs. And I think there's just different approaches. And so I'm hoping that the waiver is one step. I think there's other telemedicine. We passed a couple of bills this legislative session on telemedicine, direct primary care. I think there are several other ways and approaches that I think will move us in the right direction. But I think we have the same goal. It's just the approach.
Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, let me just point out that 37 other states have expanded Medicare expansion. It's not exactly us bucking a trend if we were to do that. It's a shame it's a political issue, a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. So let's get to work.
I guess I brought that up when State Representative Wiedauer and I were at the health department when we were there. I really wanted to talk to you more about that because I know the challenges they face, but it's also because of, we had this great photo op together, so I just hope that we can do something that is substantial around Medicaid or health insurance.
I'm going to
Representative
talk
Fry.
because even though you said I couldn't.
No, you could do anything you want to do.
Thanks for bringing that up, too. I mean, this is important. The bill that was passed out of the House and the Senate was to cover up to 100% of the poverty level. And there is a group, and I'm not going to mention any names, it was a bipartisan effort to really try to get that up to 138%. Because it would cover more people and it would cost less, and the idea that we would get reimbursed more. Right now, the way the bill was passed is that it's going to cover less people and it's going to cost the state more. It's not fiscally sound legislation, and coupled with the idea that you guys have brought up already is that the Utah plan got shot down, and so we're waiting for our turn up there on the list. So we'll see what happens. If we had only tried to put those words in, 2 words, up to 138, we wouldn't have to bring this whole process back to the legislature now, which is probably going to happen depending on the outcome of the federal government's opinion. And we have to go through this all again. And it was even tough to get that through. So, but I will say that we are closer than we've ever been. And Commissioner Denson, I'm really sorry about your mom, and I appreciate that personal story because that means a lot. And that's true. Lives are in the balance, and what we do every day up there at the Capitol changes and affects people's lives, and we need to pay attention to that.
Commissioner Link.
This is related. We hear that there are going to be some pretty significant budget cuts, and we have particular concerns about those cuts impacting children, especially poor children. We prefer to see an increased investment in healthcare and child welfare programs. We rank 44th out of 50 states in child poverty. There are over 11,000 children in the foster care system. The child abuse and neglect rates in Georgia are pretty dismal. In 2015, there were nearly 27,000 victims of child abuse. That's a rate of nearly 11 per 1,000 children. We have a lot of problems with children who simply aren't wanted. And we need to do whatever we can to take care of them. We also need to invest in women's health care and maternal health and prenatal care. It doesn't make it any easier when it becomes more and more difficult for a woman to exercise her right to choose. And more children are born into lives of poverty and neglect. This has a particular impact on us, being that we are a regional healthcare hub. People come from all the surrounding counties, and the child poverty rates in rural counties are about 1 in 3 children. So our local hospitals are writing off the costs of care for those children. So we would hope that there could be increased funding for services like D.FACS and increased investment in a foster care system, and increased investment in access to women's health care. So women can know what their choices are when it comes to family planning, and that they can plan their families properly and know when the right time to have children is, so they don't get in these situations where we have more and more abused and neglected children.
It's not written here, and I'm reading it, and I just don't know how I missed it, considering how old I am. But elderly care was one of the things that I saw was going to be part of the governor's recommendation for cuts. And somewhere in here, even though it's not written, when we just talk about increased investment in healthcare, we cannot forget our elderly. People are living longer, or at least they're trying to live longer. And we need to I would like for you just to kind of write it in there on your sheet of paper that we're also talking about elderly care also. And even with the children and young people, as life continues, and God bless you, you'll get older one day. You'll become elderly. So we need to be aware that the elderly often do not even have a voice, but they're one of your strongest block voters if they can get to the polls and understand the issues. But we just seem to kind of forget about the elderly. So I just wanted to bring that out. But the point I really was going to bring out before then was the support for rural broadband services, and this will be my last comment. This is Athens-Clarke County, classic city, home of the Bulldog and all that other good stuff. And we have very little broadband services in North Athens. You can drive down Nowhere Road, you can drive down Calvin Road, and there is little or no broadband service. This is a growing community, and I think in the rural areas, again, that's another part of town or group of people that are just automatically forgotten. So as we're talking, I don't have no data, I don't have no numbers, but I do know that is an issue, that there is like 2 different Athens, and that we need to make sure those folk have the same access for broadband, because this is University of Georgia. We should be embarrassed that we have areas that do not have broadband. We have areas in some of our low-income areas that do not have broadband. This is the world of technology, so I'd like to put that on your radar. And with that, I promise you I have no more comments. I support the legislative agenda, and thank you guys.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Senator?
You go ahead, Jerry.
I just wanted to clarify that, just so you know, 5G does not solve the rural broadband problem. It has a very limited range of a few hundred feet. It's to create the increased bandwidth along our roadways so that those who sell time, movies, and stuff get more money. It doesn't solve the broadband problem.
Mayor, if
Senator, I know you've worked on that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would make a few comments. One on that is that broadband is not a government-provided service. I mean, it is free enterprise, and we've taken some steps this year to try to accelerate that development so that it's more accessible to all people. And one thing we did was to allow the EMCs to begin providing broadband service, and we're hoping to see that they'll do that. I'm not sure if Jackson EMC has North Clarke County or not. I know they have portions of Clarke County, so that might help solve part of that. I just wanted to thank this group for the tenor and the civility of this meeting. You know, you read and hear so much how politics is getting nastier, has long been really, sort of a rough and tumble sport. And I want y'all to know how much we appreciate the respect and civility with which you treat us, even those of us with different opinions and backgrounds. Jerry, we were happy to see you at the Republican Party meeting last night, and that was good. I hope we treated you as well as you're treating me today.
Certainly did.
Tim, you and I go back so far, and we're on opposite ends of a lot of issues. We have a lot of more common ground than many in this room would expect, but I've always admired your passion, your commitment, your civic involvement, and that goes for everybody here. And this, to me, feels very much like a town hall meeting with elected officials that are representing other constituencies, and it's invaluable to us to learn the problems that are foremost on your minds and things we might can do. There are a lot of things you've talked about that are changes to state law that aren't specific to Athens, and so I'm taking that as constituent feedback of your opinions. There are a lot of funding requests. What can we do to fund from the state level? A lot of new spending initiatives, et cetera. And some of these things on the university are really asking us to lobby the Board of Regents, which is a separate constitutional entity that pays university employees. Those are not state employees. We don't set their pay. In fact, the Constitution lets us give one check to the Board of Regents, and they spend the money how they want. So we can help you some, but I want you to know that some of the things you're asking us are not really within the power, so don't feel ignored if we're not agreeing with you on some things, but we do have limits as to what we can do. The one thing I always look for here is there any specific local legislation request? Because that's how we can most help you. And as I'm reading this list, there are no local legislation requests for us here that's a specific to this community that we could pass and help you with. We like for there to be unanimity among the commission if you make those type of requests. And we have an internal policy in our delegation that we all have to unanimously agree to propose and promote those. And for any of you listening at home, I think you'd be really pleased by the collegiality and the comradeship and the really working relationships among our local delegation, whichever party you may be in. And I used to kid years ago that it's actually true. About 90% of the bills that we pass are completely bipartisan. We have 56 votes in the Senate, and I would bet you if you looked statistically, over 90% of them would have more than 50 votes in favor. And there are some of those that are partisan type issues that you have, more divisive votes. But generally speaking, these are bread and butter issues for all of Georgians. But please let us know if you do have, Tim, I see you raising your hand, any specific local legislation. For example, we created a new state court judgeship a few years ago, and there are some things that are uniquely local rather than, something that's a local desire but requires a change of the state law.
Thanks for that, Senator. We've got one item that's around a local homestead exemption opportunity, and then a couple that would have statewide applicability, but do have some specific language around them. So, while we're sitting here in September, I hope that in the next 4 or 5 months, in the lead up to the session, we can have some continued conversations to see how some of this might be integrated into some coming legislative opportunity. So, Representative Wiedauer.
Well, before I digress a little bit, I want to echo what Senator Cowder said. I appreciate the tenor of the meeting, and I certainly appreciate being here. I did want to go back to the broadband thing real quick. Something that we've all discussed at some point, and if you guys can help us with it, when you're discussing it, leave rural off, because rural starts to form an opinion that, we're only talking about South Georgia, or we're only talking about areas of the state that may grow crops. I mean, it is an issue that whether you're growing crops in South Georgia, you're trying to, you're a high school student in the far reaches of East-Clarke County, we all need access to broadband, high-speed internet. So the word rural, I mean, it gets kind of thrown around a lot, and I think that there are opportunities for communities like ours to get overlooked because of that. So we've tried to do that internally, but certainly if you guys can help us with that, that's a huge thing, is we need people to understand this is about broadband for everybody. This is not just about rural areas. So anyway, thank you.
Commissioner Denson?
And this will be the last time I talk, so yeah, I'll say thank you, and I appreciate those nice words, Senator Kauser, and I definitely reciprocate that. Though we might be on different sides of the ideology line, maybe some, I appreciate that. I've had a good rapport with every one of y'all, and I hope that continues. But on the local legislation, on item number 17, I think would be our one item that is asking for local legislation. And this is to create a homestead exemption for homeowners with a household income at or below 150% federal poverty level. The big thing here is that we have some of our lower income neighborhoods honestly facing pretty extreme gentrification. I think probably all of y'all have seen this and understand where this is happening at. And what we're asking here is very similar legislation of what they did in Oconee County, not exact, but very similar to what they did there and had passed a few years back. So I'm hoping that this body, which has already unanimously said that we support this, maybe could move that forward and ask for y'all to take that to the next level. We would definitely appreciate that. And then the last item that I wanted to speak to is item number 4, the reverse the ban on undocumented residents receiving driver's licenses. Here in Northeast Georgia, we're becoming more and more diverse and definitely have a decent population, hundreds of thousands of undocumented residents here. And no matter where you stand on the immigration debate, although I hope we all stand on a compassionate side of it, it's for the best safety, honestly, of Georgians that we make sure that all people using automobiles have had training and have a driver's license. It's actually, unlicensed drivers are 5 times more likely to be involved in a fatal accident. And because of this, we have 14 states here in the United States that do allow residents undocumented to get a driver's license, because it's just a good safety issue. It's also a good economic issue, just letting people be able to get around more easily. It also helps with insurance. If there is accidents, these people are insured. You have less hit and run situations. I know the politics can make this very divisive, but when you're looking at this of what is the best for our society and our community and safety-wise, we want everybody trained who's behind the wheel of a car, and we want everybody to be insured. And if that is what we're going to get, if that's what we need to have a safe society, then we need to make sure that everybody's able to get that training and get that license. Because people with documentation or not, you have to, especially in a community like Athens, you have to be able to drive. You just have to. And so, licensed or not, they are driving to get their kids to school, to pick up prescriptions, to get to jobs, to buy groceries. And let's just make sure those people are trained and know how to drive, have insurance, and are aware of our traffic laws. So, and that'll be the last thing. Again, I really appreciate y'all coming. This has definitely been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Senator Fry?
Commissioner Denson, on that number 17, could y'all send us
Draft.
an official, hey, we all approved of this piece of local legislation and we'd like y'all to work on it? No?
Do that.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to understand,
Commissioner?
Senator Kauser, what did you say?
I said a number of things. One in particular you want me to reiterate?
Yeah.
Which issue?
Did you say that, that our list, this long list, that it was not
It is not local legislation.
local legislation?
These are not
So
requests
these-
for Clarke County.
I got
They're
you.
statewide law
I got you.
changes.
I got you.
Which I
Okay.
appreciate your input on that. You're a constituent of mine, and I look after you. I don't look at anybody's party affiliation or whether they're elected or not. You know, you and I have gone way back from your
Oh, yeah, we're
school
good.
board
We're good.
issues that we share.
We are real good, but I just wanted to make sure that, I just want to make sure I understood, because it almost sounded like you were saying that you couldn't even consider this because it wasn't local, you know?
No,
and-
I can vote on them. I'm just saying.
Okay, I got you.
What have you got here? You got 20 issues, and 19 of them are changes in state law or requests
Yeah,
for additional
yeah.
state funding. Only one of them would require local
understand.
legislation specific to your jobs.
I understand.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, there might only be one specific item that qualifies as local legislation, but there are many items that basically ask the state to remove the preemption on them, basically just get your boot off our necks. We over and over and over again, we get requests from constituents, and we're like, sorry, we can't help you. The state won't allow us to do that. The septic tank regulation is one of them. Some means of funding transit, if we could add registration fees to help fund our transit, auto registration fees to help fund our transit. The authority for state local jurisdiction to provide penalties for possession of under 1 ounce of marijuana, basically decriminalizing marijuana possession. Local control of speed limits in school zones and radar enforcement. That was probably the number one constituent concern, is safety in neighborhoods, speeding traffic. And there's not a whole lot we can do about it. So and I know we've brought this up before, this comes up every year, but if we could have the state remove some of those state preemptions on local speed limits, and local control of affordable housing items like inclusionary zoning, impact fees, locally regulated opportunity zones, and property tax exemptions, which is kind of implied in the homestead exemption item. And also, the local government's ability to regulate building design. These are all things that basically just say, just let us do our jobs as a local government and come up with rules that apply to our local community. Just remove that preemption and allow us to create the kind of local ordinances that can help our community thrive.
Just following earlier comments, I'll certainly be in touch with every member of the delegation in the next few weeks, follow up on some of these, just as pre-filing continues, as I know some things are already out there in the hopper. And certainly, if you ever need to reach out to us, we welcome the continued communication. I very much value that I can text Commissioner Cowsert or call Representative Gaines or Representative Fryer Wiedauer, and we've got frequent back and forth opportunities for conversation. So thanks so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank y'all for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Folks in the audience, we're going to rearrange slightly. I am going to shift so the screen can come down and we can look at the presentations that we've got in front of us.
Yeah, actually, I do need one.
An agenda. I'll just-
All right, y'all, we have just 3 more items this evening. The first of which is a downtown park presentation based on a set of requests, including for myself, for the space that's adjacent to the newly installed mural.
Did we get these slides?
Just behind us.
Did we get these slides?
I'm not sure, but I'm sure we can find it for you.
Okay. It's on the agenda? I get it.
So we've got David Lynn, co-director of the Downtown Development Authority, that's going to walk us through the Washington Street Park possibility.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mayor
being
Gertz. I
here.
appreciate it. Mayor, Commission, Manager Williams, Attorney Drake, appreciate it for having us here tonight. Again, my name is David Lynn. I'm co-director of the Athens Downtown Development Authority. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Downtown Authority, we appreciate being invited to this conversation. And again, we want to start this conversation regarding Washington Street. I'm joined tonight by co-director Linda Ford, former commissioner, as well as the chairman of the Downtown Development Authority Board of Directors, Jason Leonard. I'd also like to introduce Matthew Dean, who's landscape architect with the Downtown Design Group, which is a division of the Department of Community Affairs that we've engaged for design services to start this conversation. Why we're here tonight is to talk about a potential new public park at the intersection of Washington and Lumpkin Street. And we're very excited to hear that conversation generated from this body, and we wanted to attach ourselves to that initial conversation. Although we're here tonight to talk about specifically the park at Washington and Lumpkin Street, we'd also like to take the opportunity to include that park in a broader context of this entire block between College and Lumpkin Street, which we see as a lot of potential. I snapped this photo on the right, this in your upstairs conference room. It was a piece of art done in 1990, and as you can see from that rendition, this section of Washington Street is green and it's leafy, and the streetscape and street are new, and there's activity, there's buses there in the bus bays. Well, the buses are gone, and the trees are gone, and the streetscape has gotten a little bit shop-worn. But we see this block as having an incredible opportunity, primarily of what's happening on the south side of the block. But I know that this board is interested in reinvigorating the public side, the north side as well. But before I get too far afield, what we're here tonight is to start a partnership between the Athens-Clarke County government and the Athens Downtown Development Authority to develop a public space and/or spaces on Washington Street, and we want to begin that conversation. On the south side, there's been significant private investment from the private sector. Tweed Recording has invested many millions of dollars into the redevelopment of 3 downtown retail spaces, and they are soon to launch, I believe, 20 students into that facility. And as we know from other downtown communities, and we don't need to be lectured about it in Athens, is that students downtown in educational buildings foster activity. And we think the impact of Tweed Recording, a daytime use with 8 to 5 presence, is definitely going to impact what happens on the other side of the street. Public side, we need to catch up a little bit. As you can see, the trees are gone, the buses are gone, but the streetscape still reflects the old bus transfer station there. The streetscape and sidewalks are outdated. It kind of looks like, Soviet-era Eastern Bloc out there. And I know we can make that more welcoming and promising to people and bring a block back to life that has a lot of potential. But before we start investing public money into our public spaces, we do need to refer back to the master plan. And the Downtown Master Plan is a document that's not a parcel by parcel prescription of what has to happen on a particular block or piece of property. Dr. Crowley himself describes it as a cookbook of ideas and possibilities. And as we read that land use plan, we see a theme that says we're a dense hilltop town, and if we want to increase the opportunity for social, cultural, and economic interactions, we've got to mine new places downtown to put in new things, more interesting things for people to come and walk to and visit. On Washington Street, the land use plan dedicates some time. I'm not going to go too far into this. It recognizes the need for infrastructural upgrades along this block, especially in terms of pavement and sidewalk. And as you well know, the Downtown Development Authority presented a reconfiguration of Washington Street and College Avenue for this SPLOST that was rejected but well received by the Citizens Committee, and I think that positions us well for a future T-SPLOST. We're continuing on Washington Street. I'd like to point out the third bullet where Dr. Crowley recommends redeveloping the old police building or the Costa building, and street level commercial and an alleyway connector to an interior park. And I think what he's looking for is there's a wealth of opportunities in this block to look at it in a new way. So instead of a surface parking lot, let's consider a public-private development there that has perhaps a commercial space on the street level with offices or some other institutional use above it. The siting of the mural, however, on the site next to the Costa building presents us a great opportunity of one we shouldn't ignore. Having some green space around City Hall is a great idea, but this is an immediate opportunity that we should take advantage of for a variety of reasons, not only to celebrate the mural, but to provide some downtown meeting space for people outside of North Quad, for example. Some of the other ideas that I'd like to introduce tonight is the use of the old bus kiosk here. Unless we're content to try to describe to our children this urban artifact and why it's still there, we really need to get to work on this space. And it was our idea, after walking by this space constantly, that something can be done here. I mean, once you go through the red door, which is the best part of this space, it really is a definition of underwhelming. You can barely squeeze by back here. There's really nothing back there. It's like an old Western sod from a Western movie. But there's some potential there, and so we engaged our friends at Character Built Construction, who are doing a lot of work downtown, to come up with some ideas, specifically with a restaurant or cafe space in mind. And they've come up with several ideas, or two ideas, I should say. One is a small concept for a restaurant, pickup market, grab and go type thing, which transformed the interior of the space into like a streetcar diner type look, and maximizing the sidewalk space for tables. And in both concepts, I'm going to show you, everyone that we've shown the site to is very impressed with the plaza space over the kiosk. They say that's a gym that no one really knows about. It's shady. You look over the sidewalk. It could be a really interesting sidewalk cafe space. The other concept was a larger version. You can see they gave us detailed enough drawings to where an actual kitchen and restaurant facility could fit into both of these concepts. And we see a lot of potential here. And to that end, we've released an RFI, which is a request for ideas, to some restaurant partners to see, how they would approach the space. And it's our vision that we would engage a private sector partner to help us develop this site. Perhaps the Downtown Development Authority, in conjunction with the unified government, would bring this space to a white box, so to speak, and a restaurant partner would convert that into a functioning restaurant. And we have released that RFI, and we did get some good responses. But here, that brings us to the park site, and just to refresh everyone's memory of what this looks like. It's very institutional in feel. It's a surface parking lot for the Water Business Office, but we can't pass up on this great opportunity that's been provided to us, that there's a National Endowment of the Arts funded mural overlooking this spot by a nationally known muralist. and it's time that we celebrate that. Now, just going back in time a little bit, this is a shot from the 30s looking east from Lumpkin Street down up Washington Street. You can see the Costa building on the left there with some ice cream trucks parked in front of it. Note it's a two-way configuration at this time with diagonal parking, which is a great indicator, as you can see from the photograph, that there's commercial activity and life happening on this street, and it's not just an institutional feel.
I think I see Jerry in it.
Yeah.
Is that where the pub is?
I move for adjournment.
Moving forward in time to the 50s, this is a picture I snapped that's hanging in your planning office that Philip Seagraves dug out of the City Hall. This is it was the site at Lumpkin and Washington, like a lot of our corner lots in the mid-century, were gas stations. And this was a Gulf station for a number of years. There's Gulf sign there. It's a very interesting building. And in fact, on the side of the Costa building, you can see a large, mural, a Coca-Cola advertising sign there that overlooked the site. And just for interest, this was the water tower that was in the City Hall parking lot. Moving to the 60s, you can see the more modern Gulf sign on the site, and it was still functioning as a gas station. Mayor Gertz gave me a document of the urban redevelopment survey of downtown, and as of 1965, it still was a Gulf station, and the Costa building was the University of Georgia storage building. Moving forward, I'm not quite sure of the date of this photograph, but from the Hill Street Blues Chevy Impalas out there, I assume it's from the late 70s, early 80s, and you can see it at this point it's functioning as a surface parking lot for Athens First Bank, from whom the county bought the property from. It brings us to the site itself. As I stated earlier, it's a 20-space employee lot. I think in the balance, what we're looking for is in the Downtown Development Authority, that every surface parking lot that's downtown has to be converted to a more either public use or commercial use. Space is too valuable to be used in this type of vehicle storage. But I realize that's an inconvenience to employees, and the Downtown Development Authority is more than willing to house any one of these vehicles, and two of our decks are on surface parking lot, so we can take care of that. I'm going to flash the first rendering of the park that was created to us by Matthew Dean and Carmine Fischetta from the Downtown Design Group. And again, this is just a beginning. We want to emphasize the mural and use this site as a gathering space, a performance space. I know that every one of us has ideas about what this park should look like and what features should be on it. I remind you that it's only 9,000 square feet, and really the attention needs to be focused on the hot corner mural as well as performances that are there. I'm not a landscape architect, so I'm not going to go in depth on the philosophy of the design, but there is a sunken green space here with seating around it, some stadium-type seating on this side, as well as performance space and some green space. But we've cleared out some of the green to be able to get a better view of the mural, which is largely hidden now on the street side. Here's a bird's eye view, and then a close-up view where you can see the performance space in relation to the mural and seating in this area, as well as the interior green. I think this will be a great, the Kids Fest stage for AthFest is out in the middle of the road. This would be a great alternative, one of their secondary stages for AthFest, as well as just an easy resting space for families with kids that come down to the festival and just to get out of that frying pan of our summer festivals. So I know that you'll all have a lot to say about that, but just for next steps, we'd like to bring forward to you a preliminary concept for you to approve, and then if that's met with approval, an intergovernmental agreement or a memorandum of understanding of how we can work forward and work with you. As Downtown Development Authority is more than willing to manage the public input process, final design, and construction. Now, I know that some of these are not in the right order, but these are the elements that we know we have to achieve, and we think we can achieve these elements from soup to nuts and within a year. So thank you. Downtown is a work of art, and we appreciate being part of this conversation.
Commission thoughts on this item? Commissioner Lee?
Yeah, I want to thank the ADDA for bringing this forward. You know, was it 3-4 months ago? I think it was Commissioner Denson and Commissioner Edwards and I wandered over there while the finishing touches were being put on the mural, and we were like, wow, this would make a great place for a park. And I'm really glad to see this moving forward. One thing I'm particularly interested in as this idea emerges is making sure that it is particularly a kid-friendly space. I don't necessarily see that happening in this particular design, and I know this is just an early concept, but over and over and over and over again, I hear from my constituents is downtown is just not a friendly place for kids. What do I do if we want to go downtown and, meet someone or do quick shopping, and Dad wants to sit with the kids, there's nothing really to do with them. And I spend a lot of time in Chattanooga. My sister lives there, and she just had a baby. And I send people to Chattanooga all the time who are looking for great family vacations. And that is a city where around every block there's something to do with your kid. A piece of sculpture to climb on, a fountain to splash in, dance steps on the sidewalk. Or even just, a really nice shady space with a little green space for the kids to run around and roll around in the grass or slide down a hill. They've got just hills to slide down. So I would request that we, make a real effort to make this a kid-friendly space, whether it's through climbable art or, a fountain, kid-friendly.
Commissioner Wright?
I'm also happy to see this move forward. I feel like it was discussion about the mural, maybe the ribbon cutting, and then we were like, gee, why don't we, and it was Commissioner Denson brought that up, and I think we were all the great idea, let's make this happen. So I'm glad that it's moving forward, and the part that I would like to see happen in that year or whatever the time frame, and as fast as we can do it, is I think that whole parking lot right now needs to be serving the people who come to the water business office. I don't think it should be employee. I think we should raise the gate, put 15-minute only meters on it, Commissioner Davenport. But anyway, it would be meters that's 15 minutes only, so people can come in. How many of you guys have seen the people circling around trying to park and take care of business at the water billing? So if we could continue the momentum of this, have the employees be in the deck, and let the public use those parking spaces to get to the utility office. I think that would be an extra bonus to what's coming. And
Commissioner Edwards?
Thank you. This looks like a very inviting, pleasing space, and I too would like to see a little something more intentional for children, if we could. And I don't think it has to be complicated. Jungle gym bars or a pull-up bar, just something simple they can climb on. I love fountains too. It gets really hot in Athens, if that's a possibility with the geography or geology. But otherwise, I think this is really a phenomenal idea and could really be a lot of fun for downtown. So well done. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We had considered, those watertight walls that you see in urban parks, or maybe even a cascading water feature along this area here, especially in light that it's next to the water business office. You can bring attention to water issues, et cetera, et cetera. That does obviously increase the complexity of the development. And again, we want to focus primarily on the mural, but we understand it's just a beginning.
Commissioner Davenport?
Yes, I love it too. I think it's a great idea. I am not a concrete guy. I love to see more grass. for some reason, we keep cutting down trees. Is there any way we can trim back trees instead of just cutting them down? It's hot in Georgia in the summer. So like, just cutting down trees, it seems kind of, backwards moving. But like, if we trim back some of the trees with that, I would suggest that we do that. But just more green, less concrete.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Thornton?
I love this. Whatever you can add to it, it would just be value added. I want to, I think some of us talked amongst ourselves about this concept, but I want to thank Commissioner Denson and Commissioner Hamby for taking it to the next level. Talking amongst ourselves doesn't get us to where we are now. This is really nice. Whatever you add, I loved all the suggestions that were there, but I just think this is a good piece for the downtown area. And I just hope we can, I want to move forward as fast as we can.
Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks, David. This is really exciting to see here, and I agree with Commissioner Thornton. I think we can definitely make some improvements. But I'm glad to hear everybody's on the same page and likes where this is going. I'd also like to see maybe more increased green space. On the little the tiered thing coming down the left side, I understand the seating, but the boxes, what's that? What's the idea that those would be?
Matthew, you want to join us? I'm getting out of my lane here.
I'm going to hand out some stuff too. I wasn't the principal designer on this project, but I can speak a little bit to the design sort of philosophy.
Okay.
I think I would probably call that maybe a multi-level seat wall.
Okay. The uppermost part, it kind of looks like it's hollowed out boxes almost.
That's
It looks like planters
That's
to
an
me.
existing feature. Right now, I think there's crepe myrtles planted in there. It's just it's a bunch of beds.
So I wonder if we could possibly have some kind of trees or something like that could be coming down, so it frames the mural a little bit, but definitely offers some of that shade. Which, I'm imagining this is fantastic for AthFest. But this is also going to be so hot sitting there, and if you had some trees kind of coming over you a little bit, that would be great. And I do love the idea of a fountain thing. Again, if maybe it's facing the stage, so while music's happening or events are happening, kids can play in the fountains. I think that'd be a great piece. And the only thing that I would really like to see that I don't see here is tying it in a little bit more to the mural. And I understand this isn't a full concept, but if we could have some kind of more historical elements, if maybe just some kind of placard design at the bottom of the mural, going back there, kind of talking about the history of Hot Corner, the history of Black Athenians in our downtown space. I talked to a few people about trying to name this the four matrons park after Miss Neely and Miss Walker and Miss Barnett and Miss Moore, just to tie in that history of Black Athens, since that mural is kind of the focal point. So I'd love to see some exploration done with that moving forward too.
For sure, and I think in some of the renderings you'll see we suggested lighting to have that sort of lit up at night. I think that would look nice.
That would be, thank you.
Commissioner Link?
I'm curious, was there any kind of general public input on what the public would like to see in this space?
Not at this point. We heard the commission, Commissioners Benson and Hamby, loud and clear, and we wanted to get this conversation rolling. Obviously, public input has to happen before any design is finalized.
Yeah, I'd like some kind of survey to be put out there so the general public could weigh in on what they'd like to see. I definitely would like to see more green. I agree with Patrick. This is too much concrete, especially when you think of that western sun beating down on it for the 6 or 8 months of summer that we seem to have these days. And just definitely, I don't think it needs to be a complicated space. Even that sunken center there, I don't think anything like that's necessary. I think the simpler the better, but more green and more playful elements and historical elements to attract children and teach children and visitors.
I just want to say I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. One of the great things about sort of our process is that, as we look at a concept, and this will be in front of commissioners at our agenda setting meeting next week from tonight, that provides that sort of early ground level entry point for some community input, for some additional items that folks may want to see integrated into this as we go forward. And while there hasn't been a whole lot of conversation among the commission about the kiosk where the former bus station was, I really could see a kind of link between this space and that space. And I will say, as a parent of a young child and underattended public or semi-public kind of a space, or those places where the parents can hang out with the kids and enjoy a cold beverage at the same time. So if all of that could be woven into this, I'd love to see that happen.
And I put, Matthew brought us some handouts on Gene's desk there, kind of give the design a little bit more detail. I encourage you to look at that.
Come here, one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Davenport, I
I
apologize.
think the bus kiosk is a great concept and idea, and be great for our food trucks as well. So people can actually have a place to sit down when they get their foods.
Commissioner Benson?
Yeah, David, on that, I did have a question. So the RFI, when do y'all have that open till, and when are you expecting to get results on that?
Well, we have gotten some response. We've got 4 restaurants or 4 food concerns that are interested in the concept. Obviously, before we went, we're just searching for ideas to see if there was anyone out there remotely interested. And there's some interesting concepts in there I think that y'all would like. And we'll bring those forward to you in the briefing session.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, we look forward to seeing the next iteration of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the
Really
opportunity.
appreciate it. All right, our next presentation coming up here in mere moments is from Mary Barrett Yancey, who's County Director for the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services. Ms. Yancey has been in her role for just a number of months, and so we're lucky that early in her time she's coming to see us. We know oftentimes we talk to folks from D.FACS during our budget cycle, but given the relative kind of newness of this body and the infrequency with which we get to have sort of a broader sweep of D.FACS service offerings and activities, I think it's a real valuable opportunity. So I'm glad Ms. Barrett is here.
Let's see.
All right.
Good evening. I am Mary Barrett Yancey, and as Mayor Gertz said, I transitioned over to the Clarke County office effective June 3rd. Prior to that, I have been out in Barrow County and before that in Jackson County, and have worked for the division now for a little over 20 years. I started as an investigator here in Clarke, and I am happy to be back home. So thank you for having us tonight. I have brought a few members of my team with me to make sure if you have any questions, we can answer them as best as possible. I have Deborah Maxey Hunter, who is our administrator for the Office of Family Independence Programs in Clarke County. Deborah Daniel, who is right behind me, who is one of our economic support supervisors for the Office of Family Independence. And Kelly Scott, who is sitting down over here, who will be speaking about some of our social services programs. So we did send y'all this presentation on Friday. It has our data from 2018, which is our last fully published annual report data, if you wanted to look at that. But we're just going to give you a brief overview of programs, and then if y'all have any questions for us.
Good evening, and thank you again for having us. We want to just provide you an overview of the Office of Family Independence programs that we actually offer. On the screen, you'll see here the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. That is TANF. That is a cash program that is set up with real strict guidelines as far as who actually receives those benefits. It's very low income. It's one of our lowest income programs that we actually have, and you can see in 2018, we served very small families. This is a good program as it does move families to self-sufficiency, and it really runs alongside of jobs, work, getting customers moved into the workforce most immediately before even receiving these actual services. These services do have a time limit on them. They're a 4-year time limit that a customer can receive them in a lifetime. So after 48 months, that is it. You're not allowed to receive those unless a state extension has been granted by our state office. So this is our cash assistance program, TANF.
Can you explain, if this is family, then why is the proportion between adults and children so far? 6 adults, 150 children.
That is, most times, the adults that can receive this program are those who have no income at all and they qualify for a work program. The amount of children receiving this program can vary from the children that belong to those 6 adults, but also if you've heard of the grandparents raising grandchildren programs, yes, the aunts and uncles who now have to take on nieces and nephews. So those other relatives who are within a degree of relationship, but they don't qualify for the assistance because of the income limit. So that's why you'll see that there are way more children, because we're serving all those families who are taking on the extra responsibility of raising others' children.
Thank you.
So our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, this is one of our largest programs that we actually serve here. Again, you're seeing data from 2018. This program is actually offered as an online application and a paper application. If you're doing it online, it's in the office though. You start the application in the office. You can stop and continue at home at another location, but the state had this application moved to your starting process if you're going to do it through our customer portal in the actual office. This program actually has 2 different criteria where you could potentially get your benefits within 7 days if your income limits are very low and your resources are under $150, or if you just meet the basic income limit, we have a 30-day time frame to process these cases.
Can we go back to the first slide? Could you explain that to me again about the adults and the children?
The adults there are those that actually qualify to receive the program and are a part of the work program. This is an income-based program. The income limits are very low. So, for instance, a mother who may work we talked about the minimum wage. If she's working 40 hours per week, she does not qualify for this program, and neither does her children. But for that same mother who does not have a job at all with no income, she would qualify, but we would then put her in a work activity to move her towards self-sufficiency. Therefore, these numbers are low because most customers have moved off of these TANF roles. Actually, if you're familiar with the old welfare roles, the AFDC roles, this is the new terminology for those programs.
So that is 6 is the actual number.
For 2018 in the Athens area. Because all other customers were moved to self-sufficiency and are working and do not have the need for this program.
And so we're going to see that what that number is somewhere, right?
I'm sorry.
How many people actually moved?
Off of the rolls in 2018?
Yeah.
I don't believe that's a part of the actual presentation.
That would be very interesting.
Okay, and I'm sure we would try to obtain that for you. Yes, sir.
I guess on that question, getting to that, like, is that those numbers, like 6 adults, 150 children, is that representative of most years' caseloads? Or
It is very representative of most years' caseloads, because when the welfare reform came around and the 48-month time limit came around, we really wanted to move customers to what would be more viable, which would be the SNAP benefits and or the medical assistance. The temporary assistance for needy families actually warrants that you're in a work activity at an amount of, for 2 people, $235 per month, but your work requirements per week are up to 40 hours. So if you divide those 40 hours times 4 weeks, and you only get $235, that's less than minimum wage. These actually income limits have never changed since this program was created.
I know exactly when it came about, and that's why, but I have never seen numbers of where people went to. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, and we can definitely try to obtain that data. Any other questions about the temporary assistance for needy families? Any questions about the SNAP assistance programs? Okay, and your family Medicaid. So these are your types of family Medicaids here that we actually take care of. These are your Medicaids where you have your, yes, sir?
On SNAP. dollars distributed, 25,390,000. And where is that distribution?
To the customers who are actually receiving the food stamps?
What's the geography?
Athens, these are your Athens, Clarke County numbers.
$25 million in Athens.
Is there also and I've heard this in different workshops, that with those numbers, but there's still a lot of people who are eligible for SNAP that are not either getting it or applying for it. That I've heard at another meeting. So are we reaching everybody with the SNAP program that is eligible?
So at this point, I've had some meetings with some of our partners through Envision Athens, and they have informed me of some of the perception that we do have potentially $17 million that are out there is what they have put in their reports. So we have worked with them to look at areas in the community that may be underserved, and we're working on ways to ensure that customers have access to either come in or complete the application. We're working through some ways to ensure we're breaking down those barriers if those individuals are there. We can tell you that our lobby stays full. Our gateway room where customers come in to apply for benefits is also well-traveled, but we want to make sure that every pocket in the community is served.
Thank you.
So for our family Medicaid, you'll see there that we have classes of assistance. That means that those are types of Medicaid that we serve. We have our children under 19, and that means from the age of 1 through 19, we're serving in 2018, 5,788. Parents/caretakers. So those are your parents who actually qualify for the Medicaid assistance with their children. They too have income limits, as all of our classes of assistance does. And you said that number is lower because most times if you go back and look again, the income limit is a little bit higher than TANF in some instances, but it still is not as high enough to put more parents, actually the adults, on. That's why we have more of the children in the category, at the first category. The other family Medicaid you have your pregnant woman Medicaid. That is another class of assistance where pregnant women can come in and qualify for the medical coverage. After that, we also have TMA, which is a transitional Medicaid. That kind of falls along the line of parent caretaker, where the parent and her children or his children received the medical assistance, and they didn't have the income, but throughout the period of time, they landed a job. This job may have not allowed for benefits of health initially, but then we're going to give you 1 year of medical coverage where we don't even count the income. You just have to do a quarterly report for us, and you get those first 12 months, allowing you that time to transition to your job's health care providers. So those are our family Medicaid classes of assistance. Any questions about family Medicaid? Okay. And age, blind, disabled Medicaid. This is ABD, and those are the 3 criteria that you see there. This Medicaid serves more so our aged, our blind, and our disabled citizens. QMB, and there are other classes of assistance. This program probably has about 20-something programs of assistance. You may have heard of the nursing home programs where we help the family members with nursing homes. This does look at resources very intensely to identify if the customers actually qualify. So this is a Medicaid that you did not fall under the family Medicaid, but now you're fitting the criteria of those that are listed above. What is QMB?
Yeah.
Medicaid beneficiaries, yes. Thank you. Any other questions on our ABD? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys about our child welfare program. So that includes the investigation side and the foster care side. So these are reports pulled from 2018. So last year in Clarke County, we received 1,504 reports of child abuse or neglect. Of course, those are made by anyone can call in a report. Typically, they're mandated reporters. To explain some of the language on the screen, 337 of those were screened out. That means the report had no allegations of abuse. It's usually like somebody having trouble reaching somebody, and they call the hotline and they say, hey, what's this contact person? Those are typically screened out. Then we have family support cases. Those are where we just try to provide referrals and services to the families. We have not identified a safety concern in those cases. For our investigations, we had 450 of those. 149 of those which were substantiated, meaning we did find evidence that neglect or abuse did occur in the home, and we did substantiate those allegations, while 301 of those were unsubstantiated, meaning we did have some initial concerns, but just didn't quite have enough evidence to substantiate those allegations. That would be the investigations unit. We also have the family preservation unit. That unit serves when we receive an investigation, we identify a safety concern, but really want to work with the children in the home, still with the parents, and work services to mitigate those safety risks. We would move that case to family preservation. If the risk was so great that the children could not be safe in their home, that's when they would enter foster care. And that is our third program area. And we have about 376 children in foster care currently in Clarke County. Oh, I'm sorry, 267, sorry. Yes.
Is there an average, excuse me, is there an average age or do you know the average age of these kids that are in foster care?
I would say it varies so much from infant all the way till 17. It varies greatly.
I remember a report coming out a year or two ago about foster children from Clarke County who were basically being outsourced to other counties. Does this 399 number or the 200 and something number that you mentioned, does that mean kids that are originally from Clarke County and might be scattered in outer counties, or are those kids in Clarke County?
So that number is children that were residents of Clarke County and removed from homes in Clarke County.
Do you have any numbers handy as to how many of those children were able to stay in Clarke County or maybe in a nearby surrounding county?
I don't have that exact number. I can tell you right now, we have 46 foster homes in the Clarke County area. 17 of those are D.FACS foster homes, and 29 of those are our partner agencies, the private agencies. We're part of a public-private collaborative. And it has helped us increase the number of children who are in the county, but I don't have that exact percentage.
But the need is much greater than the number within
Yes.
Clarke County.
Yes. We still have a great need to develop more foster homes in the area. Yes.
Last year, and I was trying to Google it to see if I could find the number, but the legislature passed a legislation that kids could go to family members and even groups before they get into the system. Can you tell me, first of all, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming I'm in the neighborhood a little bit. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? I think it's to help kids from getting it, but I was kind of shocked because it wasn't, we know about, and you do it through the probate court, from what I understand. It doesn't come through you. Are you familiar with that?
So there was a bill passed this summer that relates to temporary alternatives to foster care, which allows the juvenile court to take action and make a movement to grant guardianship or custody to a relative. Typically, we are involved.
But it was more than a relative. That's the part that is eating me up a little bit.
So the other part might be what we refer to as kinship. That could be a blood relative, or it could be an identified person that child has a strong bond with.
That's the one I was thinking of.
So it could be a kinship caregiver.
So is that being used?
Yes, we actually have two programs that we are currently working with in our office. If a child has to be removed from their parents' care, we seek relatives first, and we work with the families to work through a voluntary kinship arrangement, if that works. If not, then we would seek foster care through the juvenile court and place with kinship relatives. And that could be a biological relative or an individual who we have determined has a kinship relationship with that child.
Is that still through, but are they still in the D.FACS system, or is that separate?
Those would be in the D.FACS system.
Okay, so why would the probate court be involved?
So if individuals go to the probate court to petition for guardianship, they could do that independently.
Okay.
Any other questions about this data or programs? We do have a board that is appointed by you all. It is currently a 5-member board. Emily Boness is our board chair, and Andrea Lingard is our vice chair. Jane Okrasinski, Emily Coleman, and Shay Post are our members. We do meet every other month, and they govern and review how we utilize the funds that you all have supplied to us. Much of that money that we receive goes to support foster care youth and their caregivers. When state funds or AmeriGroup funding doesn't cover information, we also have general assistance to the community that we take on a walk-in basis. It has allowed us to apply to give salary supplements for retention to staff who are on board. It doesn't start until after they're there for a year, and the more years of service, there is a percentage increase on that salary supplement. It has also provided capacity for us to support temporary staff while we have vacancies, and we are onboarding permanent staff. It has provided staff development opportunities and trainings, staff morale activities. It allows us to also utilize the service for dictation to staff. We currently have some vacancies, and while our staff are on the road, we have a call-in dictation service they can use to document case activities so that we can keep those up to date within the mandated timeframe. It has also helped us purchase equipment and supplies. So we are very appreciative for y'all's support to our office. One thing we talked about before was the foster homes. I'm sure you are all familiar with the Home in 5 public-private collaborative. If you are not, I would encourage you to look at the Facebook page. Provides a lot of updates. If you have or know anyone who is interested in becoming a foster parent, there's a calendar for orientations and trainings on the homeinfive.net website page, and they can also message us there. Yes.
The slide, could you go back?
Yes.
That last one, supplement state stipends paid to board members, what is that about?
The board members receive a stipend and travel to attend board meetings.
Okay.
And I will be honest, I don't know what y'all's portion is and what the state pays for out of that percentage. I can ask my office manager.
Okay, no problem.
And of course, our websites, we have a call center that operates 24 hours a day. If there's a child ever in danger, someone can call our hotline at 1-855-GA-CHILD, and can also use our mandated reporter portal online. There's a short training to take, but once you're registered, you can use the portal to make a report and then track the intakes that are made. Any questions for us? Yes.
Tim?
I guess one I'd have would be, well, I guess before we get to that, Commissioner Neesmith, I heard and I also saw that number, that $25,389,000 number. It's a big number. But while we're sitting here, I did the math, and dividing that by the 16,716 recipients, it comes out to $4.16 a day per recipient. So when you really think about that, I think that's not a big number. That's
Yeah, I wasn't saying otherwise. It was
yeah. I just wanted to
Yeah.
put it in context. I saw the number two. I was like, that's a bigger number than I would expected to see. But of course, $4.16 is less than what I paid for my coffee that I brought here. So, the question I'd have for y'all is, with the expected state budget cuts coming, what do y'all see what effect having on the services that y'all provide? I understand this might just be somewhat theorizing, but I don't know. Yeah.
So right now, we don't know how the proposed plan is going to impact us locally. As a state agency, we want to work as efficiently and streamline our processes. So we hope to learn more about those cuts and how we will react to those.
Thank you.
Larry, I can't Can't thank you enough.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You guys do great work. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
It is.
Y'all, as we transition to the next item, the Sandy Creek Basin Sewer Extension, I'll give a little bit of background. I know Glenn Coleman from Public Utilities will probably repeat some of this. But as you probably know, the commission a year ago approved the amphitheater project that's on 441 at the Loop, just outside the Loop on the right if you're going north. And knowing that part of that project was an approved lift station or pump station for the waste from that site, I asked Public Utilities if that provided some opportunity for us to support the largely lower income community immediately adjacent, all of which are on septic tanks, which of course we talked about earlier in our time with the legislative delegation. Many years ago, the Public Utilities Department identified these two sort of hot spots in the county where we had a big number of tightly clustered septic tanks on small lots. One of them is adjacent to here, and one is sort of on the east side of town. And so that sort of initiated staff doing some research to determine what options may exist that would not only serve the amphitheater, but serve that adjacent development, knowing that there are a lot of quarter acre and even smaller lots in this vicinity that are on septic tanks. And so that's the presentation that you'll see in just a minute. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Glenn Coleman. I'm the interim director for the Public Utilities Department. A couple of individuals with me today is Ed Vogt. He's a utility engineer. And Greg Jackson will be taking part in the presentation. He's also one of the staff engineers of Public Utilities. The reason we're here today is to share information with you regarding expanding sewer service into the Sandy Creek Basin. I'd like to do that by looking at the 2020 Service Delivery Plan update that's occurring now, but also have a quick look back at the 2015 that'll play a part as you see as we move through this. We also want to provide you with information about how we propose to expand service in the Sandy Creek Basin. We've looked at a number of alternatives, looked at the cost life cycles, and we'll be sharing that information with you as we move forward. We also did something a little different this time. We met with a group, different group stakeholders, and got their input early on, so that we could listen to their comments, their concerns, and try to roll that over into our overall project concept. And you'll be seeing how that affected the concept that we move forward with this. And we'll have a chance for questions and then the next steps. And then when we get through with the program, we'll be asking for direction from the Mayor and Commission, how you'd like for us to proceed with this project. I mentioned the 2020 Service Delivery Plan update. The Service Delivery Plan is a plan that allows us to look 20 years out, and we try to identify capital projects that we need in order to meet the existing and future water and wastewater demands. The Service Delivery Plan consists of three elements. The infrastructure element identifies each project that we need over the 20-year period, identifies location, scope, and the cost. And then the next element is the capital improvement element, and it prioritizes all those projects. It tells us in what order we need to build those projects. And then the final element is the financial element, and that tells us how we're going to pay for it, what our rate structure needs to be for the next 6 years, et cetera. One of the first things we do when we start updating the service delivery plan is we revisit the previous plan. In this case, it was the 2015 edition. We went back, looked at all the projects, the ones that were completed, then we move them out. The ones that are not completed, then we roll them over into the 2020 edition, which is what we're doing now. That necessitated us to review all the projects in the 2015 plan, and we picked up on the Sandy Creek sewer extension service area into the basin, and we thought that was something that we need some additional insight and direction from you guys on. We want to share some information with you pertaining to that. A couple of key things looking back, I guess history items, is in 2006, there was a pipeline project approved by the Mayor and Commission as part of the service delivery plan. That was the Sandy Creek Interceptor project. In 2010, that same project, at the direction of the Mayor and Commission, was removed from the plan. And then in 2015, the Public Utilities Department recommended that we consider allocating some funds so that we could be responsive, the government could be responsive to potential failing septic tanks in that area. So a project was created that was included in the 2015 plan that was expanding sewer service into the basin.
Commissioner Wright, you had a question about the timeline?
I do. Well, I was hoping that you could give us a little summary of that $5 million that we allocated, and has that been helpful?
We have not used any of it at this time.
It's still sitting there, so we can still do some good with that.
That's correct.
Perhaps.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. That concludes the history. What I'd like to do now is Greg Jackson will come up, share with us some of the special features that we identified in the basin and talk about the user group and different things. Thanks, Greg.
The Sandy Creek Basin is bounded on Commerce Road, 441 to the west, and Danielsville Road on the east, and Nowhere Road kind of runs up the middle of the basin. There may be a good opportunity to promote affordable housing, development, and redevelopment in the basin. It's also a good opportunity to implement the Mayor and Commission goal to manage environmentally damaging septic tanks and attention to targeting areas of need. All of the homes and businesses in the basin are on septic tank. Fowler Road Elementary, it's in the lower basin. It is the only school in the county that is still on septic tanks. The new amphitheater project, now under construction, will use a pump station and a force main to connect to ACC's public sanitary sewer. On March 6th of last year, the Mayor and Commission approved the sale of the reservoir property to the Industrial Development Authority, and then on August 7th, the Mayor and Commission approved the pump station and force main for the amphitheater. The septic tank count in Sandy Creek Basin, we've counted about 1,418 septic tanks in the entire basin. And they're in the 30 to 35 year age range. And a typical septic tank life cycle is about 25 years. It's important to note that PUD supports the use of septic tanks for wastewater disposal. They are completely appropriate when they are rightly sized and properly maintained. They're a good method for treating wastewater. Unfortunately, some of the subdivisions in the basin were constructed with too many septic tanks per acre. These dense subdivisions were constructed prior to unification. We want to focus on the lower basin, shown in the red circle. In this area, there's about 343 septic tanks. And Fowler Road Elementary is in this area, the amphitheater, and 3 areas of concern that we have for septic tank problems. We can look at these with some data that's been collected by the Environmental Compliance Section, PUD. They started tracking septic tank hauler manifest in 2017, and this is a kernel density map. It shows the density of pumped out tanks. The brighter the color, from yellow to orange to red, is the more dense the number of pump outs that we've seen in the last 3 years. Now, for the entire basin, out of the 1,400 septic tanks, 196 have been pumped out since 2017, and many of those are probably just routine maintenance. However, 32 of the tanks have been pumped out more than once, some of them 2 or 3 times a year. This is a direct indication of problem areas for septic tanks.
Can I ask why Creekstone isn't included in this?
I'm not aware where Creekstone is.
Well, it's the part that's all green, just to the lower left of the yellow. It's Creekstone Drive.
Above the old reservoir.
Right above the reservoir, above the pink. That's a duplex subdivision.
That's a major duplex.
But it's all owned,
subdivision.
it's all owned by one company.
Maybe
So,
They're now pumping.
right, well, you'll see my point in a moment.
Well, I
Yeah.
probably got the same point.
I got the same
Mayor, do you
point.
mind if I ask a question too, if you don't mind? Just based on this slide and based on sort of the numbers we're seeing here. in comparison, each month we get these SSO reports. Those are sanitary sewer reports, sewer lines, basically, and the spillage. So I saw this presentation coming, and I was trying to figure out, well, what's kind of the story here. And when I went back and looked at we received approximately 45 of those sanitary sewer reports over the last 2 years. And when you go look through the reports, it tells you where they are. So several instances happened in the same place over time. When you go through and add up the gallons of sewer that has been spilt within these sewer reports, sewer lines now, mind you, there were approximately, there's about 406,000 gallons of sewer. To put that in a bit of perspective, Tim did his math earlier, I did mine. That would fill a football stadium 7 feet high, football field 7 feet high of sewage. So I guess what I'm saying is, and I see where we're heading here.
It's also 1,000 septic tanks.
It's also, yeah, and well, we don't know that. I mean,
500-gallon septic tank.
yeah,
1,000.
well, there you go. But we don't. But with a septic tank, not all of the 5,000
Right.
are leaking.
Right.
Exactly. So one instance we had just last year, there was 10,000 gallons when a tree fell on one of our lines and over off Lexington Road and dumped 10,000 gallons out into the sewer. So I just want us to be aware of that too. Sewer is not the be-all, end-all.
Well, the other question is Sandy Creek contaminating with fecal matter? I don't believe it is. I don't believe it is either. Yeah, I think it's the only creek in the county that isn't.
That is correct. That's my understanding. We have done some tests, but we haven't gotten the results yet on the water quality.
So-
I would also like to point out that, you're correct about the sewer lines. We have a number of interceptor projects that have come before the commission already where you approve preliminary designs. And these are interceptor lines that may be 80, 90 years old. And I think if you go back and look at some of the old flows we had, that's some of these lines, we got problems, which indicated to us we need to do something to start replacing those lines. And there's a number of projects that identified in the service delivery plan that we're going to be replacing lines for that purpose right there.
Yeah.
We've implemented a number of maintenance improvements. We implemented a fat, oil, and grease program. We've got a major problem. When we look at the sewer overflow forms you're talking about, it'll tell you it's grease and rags or it's roots and grease. There's always fat, oil, and grease involved in it. We've
Right.
done a lot to try to reduce that.
And I agree with what you're saying, and I guess I'm just wondering, is this the most important thing in our service delivery plan that we need to focus on? I will say this also, that, in our service delivery plan, there are other areas that do have septic tanks as well, and I'm just wondering how that is, and I'm wondering how this fits into the whole service delivery plan that we'll be discussing next year. And I just want us to be careful about moving in a direction that, all the other places of where we have our water systems have the what did you say, Jerry? The fecal, and the one that doesn't, the septic tank is the one that's clean as a whistle.
And I guess my question is,
Sure.
I guess my question is, would you like to finish your presentation to hear these questions?
That's completely up to you.
I think there are just a couple more slides.
Okay, because I got some questions. I wrote them down.
On the slide, I have a question. So you have the 196 septic tanks pumped out. Is that on this map you have right here? Because this map is a zoom in from the previous map of the entire basin.
Right. What this map represents is the kernel density function of ArcGIS, and really what you're looking at is the yellow areas of where the numbers of tanks are the most dense.
Okay. So we don't, up on around, I guess we have like the edge of it here, but yeah, there's like that high right-hand corner, right? That's a pretty.
That's the hot spot.
Okay.
And that's where there were several septic tanks that have been pumped out quarterly.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, thanks.
So with this in mind, we have been meeting with other departments and with stakeholder groups for the area to come up with a concept. We met with planning Leisure Services, the Office of Sustainability, HCD. And with each of the meetings, the departments and stakeholders were very instructive. As engineers, we like to go from point A to point B, put in the most efficient sewer as possible. That's going to be at the lowest area as possible, so that's going to be beside the creek. Our maps improved with each meeting that we had. And I think we got some really good information, primarily from our stakeholder groups, about what they'd like to see as we go forward. The product we're bringing to you tonight is much better than what we started with. Here's some of what we heard. Consider all options to expanded sewer service. The next slide reviews some of what we considered for expanded service, but it is important to consider a gravity sewer in those options as well. An interesting opportunity is partnering with Leisure Services in rebuilding Cook's Trail. We recently did that with the Barnett Shoals sewer projects, with the Greenway and us building at the same time in the same location. The two main points we heard was protect the wetlands and think about how homeowners will convert from their septic tank to a sewer connection. What will the fees be? How will the connections be made? And who is going to ultimately pay for it? This is a chart of the options that we've been considering. The far column, the extended cost. What we did to get these numbers was we took the expected life of each of the systems and equated them all to the 80-year life of a gravity sewer trunk line. And then we also multiplied the land requirements at $10,000 an acre to come up with a extended cost so that we could compare apples to apples for all of the options that we've been considering. We started with a community septic tank. This would be a no discharge system, injecting septic water into the ground. At the state requirements, you're looking at about 125 acres for the lower area to put that many septic, to put that flow into a drain field. We considered a package treatment plant or an oxidation pond. Both of those would work, except they require a discharge permit. And Sandy Creek is above our drinking water intake on the north of Coney, so that's a non-starter. We wouldn't ask for it, and EPD wouldn't grant it. Now, you could take that technology of a package plant or an oxidation pond and partner that with a land application system. That's where you're using spray irrigation or drip irrigation coming out of the treatment systems. This could work. The problem with this area is the land required. You have to store the water on rainy days and snowy days. So you have to build that storage into your design. We considered force mains. We think we'd be looking at a minimum of 3. And then we also considered gravity sewer, a trunk line. All of the systems that we considered require some sort of collection from the house to the ultimate point of treatment.
Sir, could you explain about the force main, how that works?
A force main would collect this wastewater into a wet well, and then there would be a series of pumps that would pump the sewage through a smaller diameter line until it reached a point where it could flow into the gravity sewer. This is the concept that we have come up with for gravity sewer into the Sandy Creek Basin as a starting point to work in the lower basin. When we started, the sewer line was beside the Greenway came across and up this side of the wetlands. That was our first map because, like I said, engineers like to go from point A to point B. As we met with the departments and the stakeholders, the line shifted to this side so that it could be with Cook's Trail. We have these areas in green that are mitigation banks. That was a GDOT project, purchased these mitigation banks. If we were to build in these, we would have to buy a mitigation area somewhere else to compensate for that.
Wetland.
Yes, this is wetlands, yes, sir. This big tract here is also wetlands. This is where the Cook's Trail runs up this side of that parcel. To avoid the wetlands, to avoid the greenway, our design now has it starting here at the end of our North Oconee East trunk line. It goes up Hobson Road, crosses the loop with a tunnel, and then stays in roads or just off the road, coming up Commerce. It would pick up the amphitheater right here, and then staying in roads comes around to here, and this gets us close to the Fowler Elementary School.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Why do we need to take care of the amphitheater? We already did. They're building an amphitheater with a sewer design that we approved and that you approved. Why are we even concerned about that?
This wasn't an attempt to take care of the amphitheater. This was just the best alignment. It just took us by their property.
Yeah, so the other problem is that this goes through a neighborhood of duplexes that are all owned by the same people.
Those are not homeowners.
They're not homeowners. It's a landowner.
And I think that was one of your comments.
And he's obviously taking care of his septic tanks because he's got a commercial operation going on there. So what's the benefit?
If they're on commercial septic tanks now, they're not having any problem. They can stay on.
Well,
What we're
right.
seeing with that color coding we did, that there's a lot of problems going on with septic tanks now.
I was really trying to let you finish your presentation, but Jerry won't let me.
I just wonder, I mean, are we trying to provide sewer service to the rest of this 64-acre amphitheater property here? Is that on somebody's agenda?
No.
Because there's all kinds of rumors.
No.
If you've got hotels and housing and.
They have internal gravity sewers for the entire development that all come to this one point where they're going to put their lift station.
Right.
And then their lift station would
But that
come down
capacity,
Commerce and
that capacity of
MLK.
that lift station is the capacity for the amphitheater.
Correct.
It's not, there's no, as far as I recall, there was no capacity for any other development.
No, sir, it is sized for their needs.
Jerry, I think there are two small commercial out parcels that front right on the road, and that's about it, a couple acres.
And even when you mentioned about going all the way to Fowler Drive School, you know, I don't know how we have these conversations, and maybe that's the second part when we haven't even talked to these entities. I hope that I'm not going to be presumptuous, but based on first of all, thank you guys, because you did meet with me, and I think you thought you explained it to me, but I guess I'm still kind of confused. I am really not comfortable with moving forward. We have the service delivery plan, which is all of Clarke County. I don't know why we keep doing all these piecemealing. I am not comfortable with this in my district. And I think Greg mentioned there was opportunity for affordable housing. If we don't plan that out on the front end, you're right, it's going to be opportunity for housing, but you're also opening the door for gentrification. So I just don't think I have enough information being in my district to support this at this point. That was all. The more you said, the more I'm convinced that this is not where we need to be right now.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I've got a whole page here of questions and concerns. First of all, I'm not comfortable even considering this without seeing a topo map and some indications as to where the granite is along this proposed route. I'm not interested in going into Creekstone. That is private land that owned by a single entity, low rent duplexes that, if we were to invest all this public money in hooking them up to sewer, there's nothing to stop them for flipping them to high-end development. And we can call it affordable housing now, but there's no public or federal dollars attached to that to make sure that it remains affordable housing. So I am not interested in providing public infrastructure to this private project. I am concerned about why not letting this amphitheater go ahead with their pump station plan. We discussed that at length, and we discussed, staying out of this entire Sandy Creek area. I would like a tour of the area on foot. When you're talking about laying sewer lines, you're talking about taking out trees and 50-foot wide swaths of trees for, what looks like a couple miles. I'd like to see a zoning map associated with this. Is this actually an economic development project, or is this an infrastructure project? I'd like to see some information regarding how much of this property is rental property versus owner-occupied property. Because, once you put in these sewer lines at great public expense, there is no guarantee that the property owners will go to their personal great expense to hook up to them. There is a mention of using CBDG money for this. I'm not in favor of that at all. We have way many other important things for CBDG money to go to. I would like to see us invest our time and energy into figuring out how to regulate septic tanks. We talked to our state legislators about it. I'm wondering if we can't regulate them through our stormwater ordinance. We have all these other incentives for stormwater. Maybe we can add a septic tank incentive. If you get your septic tank pumped, you get a break on your stormwater fees, or you have to pay higher stormwater fees if you don't. We sold this amphitheater property for a song. They got a good deal out of that big chunk of property under the pretense that there really wasn't much development possibility for it. Apparently, there's granite underneath it. It was zoned RS5, but because of the granite, you couldn't install septic tanks. So they got that big chunk of property for free, and the most logical development of it was an amphitheater. Now we're going to greatly increase the value of that property by giving it sewer access. It doesn't smell right. None of that smells right to me. It looks like there's a motive to increase private property values with public infrastructure dollars. And I want to hear from you, Owen. I want to hear from all these stakeholders. I'm asking. I know a lot of y'all are in the audience. Send us the letters. I want to hear exactly what our environmentalists and our scientists out there in the community have to say about this.
Can I respond, if you don't mind? The amphitheater currently has approval to tie on to our sewer system, so this doesn't do anything. They don't already have is sewer service available to them. In terms of why we're proposing this line, every basin in Clarke County has a gravity sewer line in it except Sandy Creek Basin. If you go back and look at the original service delivery plan, the goals was to get public sewer up to the upper 200 acres of every basin. We never did that for Sandy Creek. We had it included in there. We never moved it forward because it was low down on the agenda. We ended up coming back, took it out at the direction of the Mayor and Commission, and we think in moving forward with updating the plan, the 2020 version we're working on now, that you will be seeing in a couple of months, was a good time for us to say, do you want to do what we already do and just leave the money there to respond to problems, or do you want us to go in and build this public sewer like we've done in the other basins? And that's why we're here for, just ask for direction.
I would like to see more cost-benefit analysis. How much is it going to cost for all these properties to hook onto the sewer? How much is the public investment? What is the environmental loss? And I'd like, an on-the-ground tour of some of this area.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wonder, in the analysis of this, have we explored how many connections that we would expect over say a 5 or 10 year period?
He's got some more, and part of his presentation will address the funding of the hook-ons. No, we have not done a survey to see who would be interested in hooking on now. All we've got is the latest information over the last 3 years and how many problem septic tanks there have been. No, we don't have that information yet. No. You know, in terms of, once we get sewer there, if somebody wants to tear it down, if it's affordable housing and build something, you know, at a higher density, that would be a rezoning issue.
Mike? Yeah, I have a question. So in 2015, we allocated the $5 million to septic tank, whatever. And since then, nothing's been done.
That's correct.
And I guess I'm wondering, you know, if this is such a sense of urgency about the failing septic tanks, I mean, why in 2015 did we not start trying to utilize that $5 million to help with the situation? That's why we put it in there.
We didn't have any record or any way of determining which septic tanks were having problems. We
Well,
started.
I guess what I'm saying, Glenn, is,
Sure.
you know, during that time frame, could we not have developed that record and developed a system for how we were going to address this besides this? I mean, that was the whole point of the motion. I remember the motion. Develop some alternative strategies and we kept the money in there, $4 or $5 million, to develop those alternative strategies.
Sure.
And I'm just, you know.
Well, I think at the time, we were just, and I think the rationale that everybody got to was, you know, if we start having problems, we need to have some money there to be able to respond to them. And then nothing was imminent, and then in 2017, we started collecting some data to try to learn more about it. So we got 2 years of data. You've seen some hot spots here.
Well, have you collected data on other septic tanks throughout the county that perhaps could also utilize it? I mean, I've got 2 neighborhoods in my district that have had septic tanks for the same amount of time as this.
Well, we can certainly do that.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, you haven't done it. I mean, you're doing it in an area that you're targeting for sewer.
Well, let me clarify. The data we're collecting on septic tanks for the last 3 years is entire Clarke County.
Right.
We're getting records of every septic tank that's pumped out. It's just not in this area. It's all of Athens-Clarke
Well,
County.
how many in this area have failed?
I think he indicated there's 36 have been pumped out more than.
But how many have failed?
I don't know how you classify failing. If it's pumped out more than once every 3 to 5 years, then there must be a problem with it.
I think, again, and I do remember Greg mentioning that septic tanks are good.
Sure, absolutely right.
Septic tanks are good.
Sure.
Given that they're maintained, and so we do not want to know that something is good and replace it with something that has all of these questions right now. That's the main thing. The fact that you have $5 million in case you had a problem, and you still have $5 million, that means to me you didn't have a problem. So I don't know why we're moving like this, especially since we have the service delivery work going on. I took the advice of someone, and I talked to some people in the neighborhood, and the people that I talked to were rental people. They've never had no problems. One lady's been living in her little apartment for 8 or 10 years. She pays $450 a month for rent. Nice duplex, 2 bedrooms, nice backyard. If we start messing with this, her $450 could be $850 before we know it. If we have not talked to the owners of these properties, that's another reason we should not be moving forward. So again, in my district, I just hope my fellow commissioners will kind of support me that we just put this on hold, and
I support you.
Thank you.
I do too.
I want to make a couple comments just in response to Commissioner Thornton's mention. Just in framing septic is good, I think it's important to remember septic is good under the right circumstances, when the right acreage is available and the maintenance is being done on a regular basis. I will say I've been in a backyard along this line in which poop was bubbling up through the ground. So I know that there have been failures here. And certainly one of the things we want to do is anticipate what we may be able to do kind of as we look over the long horizon. And I do want to note an antecedent. So if you were to track back to the early 1970s, all of East Broad Street and all of Arch Street and Dublin Street and that entire neighborhood were on septic at the time. And one of the community development plans that was undertaken during the Model Cities era was to put those neighborhoods on sewer lines, knowing that that meant that created long-term viability for the livability of those neighborhoods. I had a question just about kind of the routing of the line, if you could go to that really quickly.
Okay.
So the red line is sort of the trunk line, and so that would mean that just in terms of the way that these systems work, there would be sort of spidering off of that line. Is that correct?
That's correct. Collector lines that would extend off of that.
Okay. And so it would go to some of those other properties that you don't see touching the red line.
That's correct.
But anticipates that it would be able to access those. And then just thinking about the decision that this commission made in the springtime to offer the opportunity for either reduction in cost for connection fees based on environmental need or based on economic need. Is that a program that could be sort of overlaid here?
It could be, yes. Absolutely could be. I want to go back, if I can, to the zoning map. I think this is one of the most important slides we got in here. The question is, what was the zoning? What allowed the density they got out there now with the septic tanks they got? And this was done prior to unification. The zoning, the way it's set up back then, doesn't exist today. But if you look at the RG6, that allows 7 septic tanks per acre. That's the density of these existing septic tanks. In RG15, that's 3 septic tanks per acre. Now, you get one every 25,000 square feet. That's critical. A lot of these septic tanks on these extremely small lots, and yes, we think there's problems, and we're trying to collect the data to prove that, but I think this is indicating that there's a problem to prove. That's why we requested, and y'all approved the $5 million in the service delivery plan.
Didn't we, I'm sorry, Melissa.
So regarding Creekstone, if I understand correctly, those duplexes are less than 20 years old. They don't show up on the heat map for septic tanks, probably because they've never been pumped. Septic
Probably
tanks
so.
don't start showing signs of failure until 25 years or so. We need to get on some local ordinances to mandate that these things get pumped, because if you get them pumped before they start failing, they have decades that they can last. So, that's where we need to focus our attention, is figuring out how we can inspect and mandate that these systems get pumped, because I don't foresee these rental property owners coming up with, $8,000 per hookup? Is that the cost to hook up to a sewer line?
It's $3,000 now.
$3,000?
Plus the cost of putting in the line.
Plus the cost of putting in the line and all that, and I guess you gotta somehow put a septic tank to bed. You fill it or something? I don't know. I don't see these property owners undertaking that expense.
Without raising rents.
Well, without raising rents, yeah, and I
It's cheaper to
think, but,
pump.
to pump a septic tank
Cheaper to pump.
every 3 to 5 years as recommended is a minimal expense compared to that. Does anybody know how much it costs to pump?
500.
$350? $350 every 3 to 5 years.
Depends on size.
Didn't we install lines further up on North Avenue, Danielsville, and residents were given the option if they wanted to hook it up? So, is that correct?
We have sewer lines up in there. I don't know that they were given the options. I don't know.
In the wedge between 106 and 29.
Going up 106 by Berkland, up in that area?
They're not on the left there by Berkland.
Okay, but were there lines installed somewhere along in that area that residents were given the option to make the connection?
When we extend the sewer line, we never require the property owner to hook up.
Avita, we have a sewer line in the middle of Coney River that goes all the way to Cleveland Road Elementary School. There are lots of subdivisions along there. They're all septic.
Yes.
Okay, but my point is...
My point is, you're right.
Oh, okay.
People who have sewer lines are not choosing to hook up their septic.
But the money we're putting in there to install them, it doesn't make no sense to me. We're spending money to install lines, and people are choosing not to pay for the hookup. So they're just lines out there.
I hate to use an example, but I've worked for Athens-Clarke County for a long time. I can remember a subdivision in Athens-Clarke County that if you'd asked them 5 weeks before they started having septic tank failure, if they would hook up the sewer, they would have told you no, they didn't want to pay the monthly fees. All of the septic tanks started failing at one time. This was a subdivision behind the off Cherokee Road.
You gave me that example when we met.
Yes, ma'am.
And
We
I'm gonna
ended
give
up-
you the- And I'm going to give you my response,
Okay.
the same one. That's why we had the $5 million.
But we were fortunate we had a sewer to tie it into.
I get that. I get
And on
that.
this, if we don't do the gravity sewer, there's not a sewer tie into. Yes, there are other options, the pump stations, the community septic tank. We don't think that's the best alternative, and that's what we're here for.
Okay.
Well, I would say this too, to the point about seeing the sewage in the backyards and everything. I mean, we just laid this Barnett Shoals line down. It's next to an existing sewer line, and we're doing that because, for a lot of reasons. But one, there was, the video of us seeing the sewage creeping up from the manhole from heavy rains. We got sued over it, as a matter of fact. It cost us a lot of money. But I'll go back again, I'm not trying to argue. What I'm trying to argue is that if you're suggesting that if you can't tell me out of the 32 how many septic tanks are failing, and we're trying to spend $5 million on fixing a problem we don't know about. Sure, they're old, but sure, people are, at least they're getting them pumped out. But we still have, even with sewer, 406,000 gallons of water in the past 2 years. Not water, I'm sorry, sewage dumping into our system. Those we know is a problem. We get the reports. So I just think this needs to what's the right word?
Table.
Yeah, there you go. Flush it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are close to done, right? I can. Is there any other key elements that you need to get before?
No, I think we're completed.
Okay. And so I hear a lot of skepticism. I think a lot of this is based on before I was on this commission with this project. And I'm familiar with some of it. But it definitely kind of seems to there's a bit of distrust that we're being told the truth. I don't know.
I hope that's not the case.
I hope that's not the case too. I hope that's not the case.
Not by you. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but I don't know. I will say a good chunk of this is in my district, and I'll also say I have definitely had constituents upset that they feel they pay the same amount of taxes, but they're not getting the same services. I have heard this definitely from constituents. Rocky Drive, up on Nowhere Road, where I have some constituents up toward the north part. I mean, I definitely have had some people who feel like they're getting slighted. And I would at least like to, and I'll take this upon myself, to explore if there is the demand in this area. I know this borders with Commissioner Thornton's, so maybe the two of us could jointly host a town hall and ask people to come out and really kind of tell us the stories if there is demand here. And if so, how much? And kind of what Commissioner Link was going to, at what environmental cost, at what financial cost. And I definitely hear the concern about the recent developments in the area and trying to see how that plays into what's going on here. But, I mean, we've laid sewer pipe to a majority of the citizens in our districts, all of us. There's a large constituency in my district and in Commissioner Thornton's that don't have it. Let's see if they want it.
Well,
And if so, let's give them the option to at least.
I have no problem with that, but I feel the same way about this that I do about stormwater. And folk are paying stormwater fees. I wish you would be as strong about that comment as far as stormwater, because they're both the same to me. I have folk that pay for services that they don't get with stormwater. And now we're talking about waistlines. Right now, only thing I'm saying is that we have the service delivery piece going on as we speak. If you want to do a town hall, that's fine with me. I just am not willing to support this tonight as is. Whatever the options are, I just would like to put this on hold and we'll revisit it. And as far as if the suspect stuff of something going on. I hope that is not the intent of anybody, and that's surely not my intent. I just need to say, right now, this does not sound good. I do know that everybody that you've talked to is not happy, even though you've listed them. So I'm just not ready to move on this tonight.
Mr. Edwards.
What, what effects do we traditionally see in the development of land once a sewer trunk line like this is extended to serve it?
Typically, you'll see increase in density. Therefore, rezoning request to increase density, because you don't need as large a land area because you're not putting in septic tank.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I mean, to that point, Russell, and to kind of Glenn's response, you know, at least for me, part of my interest in this is identifying those places that are already dense.
Yeah.
You know, again, many parcels per acre, you know, versus those that are not, which is why I'd opposed the line, which essentially went to the county line 10 years ago, and why this is a limited version of that.
And we did stop it short from what was proposed in 2010. That's the reason we're calling this the lower section of the basin, where the high density is.
So am I correct in gathering that this proposal comes mostly out of a concern of the aging existing septic that serves this area?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, we had a goal in the original service delivery plan to serve each basin. That was taken out. We think there's problems with the septic tanks.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about what can we do, position Athens-Clarke County so they can respond if that happens, like it did in the example I used earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the design of our sewer system is genius. The fact that we have these trunks that are gravity fed. We don't have, well, we have one pump station in the whole county. So we have a very well
But it still
designed.
leaks 406,000 gallons in the past 2 years.
I'd be curious to compare that to other areas of our size.
I would too. I think.
Well, I'm not concerned about other areas of our size. I mean, that's still a lot. So,
And I think you're going to see that number go down drastically once we finish replacing some of these interceptors.
well, and that's another reason why we put the $5 million in, Glenn, was to address those aging septic tanks that Commissioner Edwards just spoke about. That hasn't been utilized yet.
So
Melissa, one more.
I get the, the desire to increase density to enable affordable housing. I'm just not sure that this is the right place to do it. We don't have much other infrastructure here. We don't have sidewalks here. I mean, we don't even, transit doesn't go out here. I would rather we take a look at our existing infrastructure and identify those little pockets. And I'm okay with spot zoning. I really am. When in appropriate places, take a look at those little pockets where we have existing infrastructure, where we have good sidewalks, where we have access to transit, where we have locations that are accessible to jobs and services. This isn't that location, and I know there's existing dense housing right there, and it should have never been built there. I don't know what went on 20, 25 years ago when this got zoned and those duplexes were allowed to be built there, but we don't need to reward that. If and when the time comes to redevelop that, we need to make sure that it's appropriately redeveloped, and maybe we need to reconsider the zoning there. I just think, we need to look at this holistically and answer all these questions and ask, what is our real end game? If we're talking about increasing density and enabling affordable housing, then we need to look at existing infrastructure and pick those places, even if they're little pockets scattered throughout, rather than these large swaths.
I think we're going to obviously gather some more information. Commissioner Denson's talked about some public outreach kind of as part of the kind of looking forward. I do want to note, transit does serve Freeman Drive, and they've got sidewalks along that street as well. So they
So the
connect right to there.
That's another question I meant. The Freeman Drive, the trunk line, from what I understand, going into, Creststone, that's in order to get over there to Freeman Drive and Fowler Drive. That,
Glenn, could you describe how the kind of the subsidiary lines would
Yeah.
meet to the trunk line?
The trunk lines are the larger lines that run along the low points in the basin. Coming off of that, you have what's called collector lines, which are typically 8-inch diameter lines that you would see in the subdivision. And they would run along the roads and go over to serve these different properties. And then off the collector lines, you have the service lines that run up to the house. Okay, this is what we're talking about now is the trunk line on it, trying to get it up into the basin.
yeah,
that
so
if
you
there's a-
cut through, you give Creekstone sewer access in order to access Fowler Drive. Is there a problem with Fowler Drive Elementary's septic system?
Don't know that there's a
They've
problem.
got a lot of property there. I would imagine they could.
They did that water thing years ago, so they're not having no problems. But I will say this, as we move forward, anybody that knows anything about any possible development in that area, they need to present it, because I'm hearing rumors too. So if there's something going on that is perpetuating this move, we need everything on the table.
And Commissioner, I don't know about any other development other than that that's been approved by the.
Well, I do.
I don't know if Public Utilities or staff either one has any other, we don't know who owns the property other than what's been brought before this commission, the amphitheater and those kind of things. We don't have a clue who the property owners are, nor do we need to know at this stage.
But it'd be fair to say the development community would be
Tickled pink.
tickled pink to see a new trunk line extend, right? Because it allows for denser development, it allows for industrial development, commercial development.
That is correct.
So naturally, but this body is governed by conflict of interest rules and a code of ethics that would prevent, well, that governs our behavior.
All right, everyone, thanks for coming tonight. Look forward to seeing you next week at agenda setting.